If you're looking for a quick and easy project that is a great fabric scrap buster, also a fusible fleece scrap buster, let's talk about making lanyards. As you can see by my neck and this pile of 15 lanyards that I just made this weekend, I have a little bit of experience and I want to share some tips and tricks that I have learned and figured out along the way to make this quick and efficient. Each of us probably thinks about lanyards in a different way, depending on our life, honestly. I always think about lanyards for teachers. There are many corporate offices where you're wearing a badge. Bus drivers are wearing badges. I always wear them at trade shows. I just came from a trade show and I like to make them to match my outfit or to use my most recent fabric when I'm going to a trade show that is fabric related. So no matter how or when you think about lanyards, let's talk about how to make them. So to make a lanyard, you need a piece of fabric, either a single piece, which we're going to do in this tutorial, or you can piece some of your scraps together. You could use 5 pieces of fabric, but your end result needs to be 3 inches wide by 36 inches long. Then you need a piece of fusible fleece that is about 35.5 inches, but we're going to cut that when we're ironing, so don't necessarily cut it to size yet, by 3/4 inches wide. And if you don't have a long strip, this came off of some Pellon fusible fleece that I bought by the yard. You can take fleece scraps and just put them into 3/4 inch strips, and I'm going to show you how to put them together when you're ironing so no one will know you used a few pieces instead of one. And then finally, you need your clip for the lanyard, and it is a clip on a 1-inch D-ring. Making lanyards involves a bit of ironing and straight stitching. You're going to take your 36-inch by 3-inch piece of fabric or pieced fabric, whichever you prefer, and put it on the ironing board face down. You're going to fold it in half and iron the entire length of the fabric. Now that we have that folded in half, we are going to open it up and we are going to fold one raw edge into the seam, but do not press the seam because we want to keep that fold there so that we can do our next step. So you want to keep your iron at an angle that it will press this, but not press that crease. So we've creased the entire length twice. We did it in half and then we have done this one side into the crease. Now the next thing we're going to do is we are going to be putting our fusible fleece right in the crease on the unpressed side. Now, fusible fleece has 2 sides. It has a soft side and it has another side that has the fuse material. So it's a little bit scratchy when you feel it. So just feel your way and make sure the scratchy part is on your fabric. Otherwise, it will end up on your iron. So we are going to take this piece of fleece and we are going to run it the entire length, but leave about 1/4 inch without fleece up here and on the other end. Now, as I mentioned, if you have a long piece of fleece, I'm not going to trim it until I get it all placed in here. But I also promised to show you how to use smaller pieces and put them together, and it's so easy. You basically just place it down. So again, 1/4 inch from that edge, and you're just going to make sure it is sitting right up against that crease down the center of the fabric. Make sure the ends are cut straight and you're just going to butt it right up against it. Don't overlap it or you'll have a little bit of a bump. Have it right up against it and then just keep on going. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold this side up over the fleece. And so now this fabric is going towards the center just like this one did before. Now, the directions for fusible fleece, I believe, say to heat it for about 10 seconds. I don't do that on this project. I just kind of move pretty quickly because we're going to go over it again, and then we're also going to be sewing it in place on both sides. So if it doesn't fuse absolutely perfectly, honestly, no one's ever going to know, so it really doesn't matter. We're down to this second end, and you'll see my fleece is way longer than my lanyard. So I'm just going to have it laying straight there. And then I'm just going to take scissors and I'm going to snip so that it is about 1/4 inch shorter than the end of the fabric. And we're doing that because we have to sew this into a loop and we don't need extra pieces of fleece in that seam. Now, one thing to note, when you get down here, it's really easy for this to kind of go this way and stretch and not be lined up this end. So just make sure you get this lined up nicely before you press the end. All right, we have ironed 3 times down the length now, and now we're going to do one more. Now what I like to do is I like to flip the fleece side over to be on top, because that is going to really give us more heat to fuse that fleece strip onto the fabric if it didn't get fused very well when we were turning it. And on this step, I do go a little bit slower because we want to make sure these creases are nice and firm, because the next thing we need to do is go and sew. Now, one thing that you can do is you can use a quilter's clapper or a tailor's clapper. Tailor's is just longer than the quilter's clapper. These are big pieces of wood with a nice groove in them to hold. And what you do is you just press on there. So while your fabric is still warm, you take this piece of wood and you just press down. And this does 2 things. It absorbs a little bit of the heat from the fabric, and it also sets that crease better than if you just use the iron. It's not totally necessary, but it is a great tool. It's especially helpful if you're doing quilt blocks with a lot of little seams, just to get everything nice and flat. And I do find it helpful for this as well. So now it is the width of a lanyard. And you'll see on one side, you have a little bit of space where you can see the overlap. So this is the back, and this is going to be the front. So now let's go to the sewing machine and start stitching this together. If you want to pin or clip this together, you can, but I don't really find that it is necessary. It's easy enough if you've pressed it well to keep it folded. Now, the first thing we're going to do is we are going to sew down this open edge. So not the side that's completely folded, but the side that has a little bit of flap. And you want to do it from the back side where you can kind of see that overlap, just to make sure you're getting all of the layers. We are going to start about 4 inches down from the end. I've tried closer. Just makes it unnecessarily difficult to sew the 2 ends together later. So start 4 inches down and finish 4 inches before the end. Sometimes, because you get in a little bit of a zone doing these straight, I will put a clip just to remind me where to stop. And as I mentioned in my intro, I'm going to use white thread so you can see what I am doing. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pull the bobbin thread up. And that is going to help me not have a big bird's nest knot on the back. You know how sometimes if you just start and you go forward and backwards, sometimes this thread will get pulled into the bobbin and it makes this awful noise, and then you have this big old mess. Well, that big old mess would end up being on the front of your lanyard. So we want to make sure that doesn't happen. And to do that, I'm going to pull the bobbin thread up. And here's how you do that. You're going to put your lanyard underneath your foot where you want to be sewing, and you're going to put your foot down. Then you're going to hold onto the thread, the top thread, and you're going to put your needle down and back up and give it a little tug. And sometimes that bobbin thread doesn't come up enough to really grab it with your fingers. So I always have tweezers handy. So you're going to pull that up. So this is the bobbin thread. This is the top thread. I'm going to put them both behind the foot, and I'm going to hold them. Usually I hold them with my left hand, but then you can't see a thing. We're going to hold both of these threads. I have them in my right hand, and I'm just going to go forward a few stitches and then backwards a few stitches. Okay, that's going to knot it. I also recommend using a walking foot, because even though this looks like a small project, we're actually sewing together 4 layers of fabric and 1 layer of fleece. So having that walking foot where it has feet on the top to help pull the top, as well as those feed dogs on the bottom, is going to give you an easier and smoother result. And then we're just going to straight stitch until we get to that clip, which is 4 inches from the other end. So we have stitched the entire length, and you'll see right there, that's just a nice flat back and forth. Normally I would use a color that coordinates with my fabric so that this wouldn't be very visible like it is now, but I want you to be able to see what I'm doing. So I'm using white on black. Now I'm going to give you a word of warning. This is where I sometimes get messed up, especially if I'm doing a lot at once, because you're kind of in a zone, right? You're ironed and you're sewing and you're like, okay, next step is to put these ends together. Yay, right, go. But you have to put the clip on first. Do not forget this step, or you will need a seam ripper and you will have to take this seam out, put the clip on, and start over again. When I made 15 of them, I think I had to do that 4 times before I finally remembered. So you're just going to slip this D-ring right on the fabric and just move it out of the way. Doesn't matter which direction, we'll work on that next. Then you're going to fold your fabric in half, and you're going to make sure that the stitched lines are together and that nothing is twisted, okay? So that's really important too. You don't want to sew this together where it's twisted. Now you're going to take this top edge and you're just going to start unfolding. So I unfolded the one side, unfold the other, and we're going to get this to match up. So there's going to be the 4 sections. Now I use 2 clips, and I have discovered that putting this clip on the side, so along the long side of the lanyard, makes this stay lined up better than putting it up here. Because when you put it up here, you have to move it faster. If you put it down here, you can leave it on the whole time you sew, that 1/4 inch. I just need to open this last part. And then just a double check to make sure you have it lined up right. The fleece should be opposite the fleece. All right, so 2 clips on the second part and down there. Now we're going to turn this, and we're just going to do a 1/4 inch right across the top to join the loop. Back to the iron, and if you are doing a bunch of these, this is where you could have a friend in charge. You could have 1 or 2 people sitting at a sewing machine doing all this straight stitching and these ends, and then you could have somebody else in charge of ironing the fabric together and putting the fleece in, and then also doing this step where the first thing we're going to do is we're going to press that seam open flat so we don't have a big lump there. That does press out that seam a teeny bit, but no worries, you can get that folded back down really easily. So now we're just going to get these 2 sides folded in again so that it's going to be straight. And then we're going to press that. You do need to press a little bit more where it is sewn together because it's a little bit more of a lump. I would definitely use a clapper on that if you have one. So now all we need to do, this is again the front, is we're going to sew between those 2 sections to finish closing that up. Then we're going to sew all the way around this other side, and then we just have to secure this. So irons can be turned off if you're just making one, and back to the sewing machine. Now we're going to sew the open part. So it's about 8 to 9 inches where we left it open to sew the loop together. And we are definitely going to take the time to raise the bobbin because again, that knot is going to be on the actual lanyard. So now the lanyard is sewn all the way around one side. So now you're just going to turn it around, and we're going to sew on the edge of the other side. This gives it consistency. It also makes sure the fabric stays folded the way it is, and it keeps that fusible fleece secure inside. So this is just super fast sewing. And as you're doing this, you're just moving this hook so that it stays well out of the way of your sewing. Okay, so now we have a big loop of fabric sewn on both sides, so it looks good. And we have this hook just kind of floating around. We don't want that floating around. We want to secure that guy. So I'm going to feel again and find where I put it together, so where that stitch length is, and then I'm going to just pull to get the hook at the opposite side. Now before we just do a little stitch back and forth here, you want to make sure you have the outside of your lanyard fabric on the outside. So just kind of flip it over and see which side has that fold. Okay, so this is correct. If it wasn't, all you would do is you would flip this fabric around inside the D-ring. So you have plenty of time to do that before this step. That's why I just throw them onto the lanyard. It doesn't matter which direction, but before you sew it, it does. We're just going to go straight across, and then we're going to go back. You could either stop there or you could go one more time. And there it is. This lanyard is done. It looks pretty good with the white, even though I probably would have done the black just so that you wouldn't see where we sewed back and forth. And now it is ready to join my collection of lanyards that I have available for me when I need them. They could be great gifts for anyone that needs a lanyard. They could be easy things to sew and sell. They could be great for groups. Like say you have a kids choir going to New York and they are going to be wearing ID. You can get a group of people together and you can whip up a bunch of lanyards that are going to match to make it more coordinated and also even easier to know that they're in your group, because it's not only the name you're looking at, but you can see that fabric. These would also be great for Teacher Appreciation Week. You could have a group of people get together and split up the work and make it go really fast and make one for every teacher and staff in the building. Or if you wanted to do it as a teacher appreciation gift, you could do one for each month of the year. See, I have St. Patrick's Day and Valentine's Day. So you could get themed, either school themed or seasonal fabrics, and do that too. So many ideas of how to make these. So I'd love for you to let me know in the comments any other ideas that I didn't just rattle off that you might have, or how and when you will be using this project.